Getting one last look. Live from Salt Lake City, Utah. This is Heart of the Matter, where we do all we can to worship God in spirit and in truth. I'm Shawn, McCraney, your host. Join with me, if you would, for a moment in prayer. God, we petition you to send your spirit and open up our eyes and ears and hearts and minds to hear your voice and recognize it and respond. Bless our guest tonight and help him to explain the things that are on his heart, and that we'll be able to have an open, frank discussion. Bless our volunteers and all those subscribers and those people who tune in weekly to Heart and other shows. People who are seeking you, Lord. Bless them and help us in our sojourn in this world. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a special guest tonight. I'll introduce in just a minute. We're actually going to have a few of them in the weeks to come, which just pop up, and as they pop up, you know, a door opens, you walk through. Next week, we're going to have a very interesting show. We have a young man. His dad is a pastor. He was raised in a Christian church with his dad as a pastor, and he converted to Mormonism and actually went on a mission. And then he saw the light while he was on the mission, and he came back to the faith. His name is Larry Norris, and he's agreed to sit and talk with us openly about his experience, including how his parents, his dad being a pastor, lovingly accepted Larry's decision to become LDS, and with patience just let him run the course and trusted in God to work things through. It's really quite an amazing story. So that is all next week. Then jumping out a few weeks to May 9th, and pay particular attention to this. We're going to have a guest who's coming out all the way from North Carolina, and his name is Brother Glenn Hill. Now, Glenn Hill is an author of a book called Christianity's Greatest Dilemma, and it's a book that forever changed my life. And just let me just tell you, I don't usually read everything I get. In fact, I read maybe 5% of the things people send me. It's just a time, and I very rarely, but someone handed me a book, and it wasn't very impressive looking. It was on 8.5 by 11 paper. It was like a manual you get in school to study Spanish vocabulary or something. And they handed it to me, and no, they didn't hand it to me. They mailed it to me from Canada and said, you got to just check this book out. And I opened it up and started reading about it. And I said, no way is this guy right. He is absolutely wrong. And I challenged him, and I started doing my own investigation for all his thoughts and ideas and premises, and I became converted. This man, Brother Glenn Hill, is the most humble, kind. He's been beaten up by the churches for his view on this particular subject. He's going to be with us on May 9th, 2017, and we have bought a case or two of his books and given them out to people here at campus, and it's affected a number of people's lives here at campus who have taken it and challenged it as well. So we'll have a fun time with that. So that's next week. We're going to have Larry Norris, and then on May 9th, we're going to have Glenn Hill. Tonight, we have an interesting young man named Bryce. Gosh, I'm sorry, I thought I had this. Blankenagel. I had it. But the important thing is the young man, he has a interesting worldview. And this afternoon I sat with Bryce. He does a podcast called Naked Mormonism. Naked Mormonism. All you got to do is type that in, Naked Mormonism. And first he'll come up with a picture of me sunbathing. I'm just kidding. You will come right to Bryce's podcast. And we're going to talk to him about his podcast and what he's doing. He's been traveling around. And very interesting, but we did an hour and a half together or so talking on this podcast openly. Now, before he joins us on the air, I want you to know a few things of interest about Bryce. He's a former Latter-day Saint, and he came to know the truth about the religion, and he left for atheism. And he is not unusual. In fact, he probably represents what most LDS people do once they come to discover the truth about Mormonism. So he represents probably a large majority of former LDS people, and we'll discuss that tonight. He's no slouch. He's well-read. He's articulate. In fact, in my estimation, he represents the new or the next generation of Mormon critic groups out there. The way I see it, we had early Christian and mostly Christian attackers of Mormonism way back in the 1800s. And then, of course, we've had the Font Brodys and the Gerald and Sandra Tanners and the Ed Deckers and D. Michael Quinn and Vogel, and Michael Marquardt. Today, Bryce and I talked all about these guys because we've met them and know them and interviewed them. And, I popped up for a second on the thing, and then there's Adams Road, and there's Earl Erskine and Doris Hanson and Warren Puckett, and there's this generation who is there, and they're speaking and teaching, and Jeremy Runnels is something. But in my estimation, Bryce represents a new breed of critiquers of Mormonism. And you'll hear why I believe that tonight. But what I will say is that with his approach, I sincerely hope the LDS Church will wave the white flag now and will say, okay, let's assimilate into traditional Christianity and get rid of our history and all of our strange esoteric doctrines. Because Bryce is a threat, not only to Mormonism, but in my estimation, he's a threat to people of faith. And I say this in love. I love Bryce. I like him very much, and I love him as a human being and a brother here on earth. But his views and what he's bringing people to is not to say, come out of Mormonism and follow Christ Jesus, the way that I've done and the way that Warren does and Earl and things. It's you have been deluded, you have been tricked, and the other stuff you might think you're going to follow relative to God and stuff is also a trick. And that's his view, and I think that is the future, and that will, to me, cause a lot of damage in the lives of people. But we'll talk about that openly, because in here we will talk about anything, and we'll talk about it in the spirit of love and community. So Bryce, come on up and talk to us and tell us about your podcast, and tell us about, well, we'll just talk for a second, see where this all goes. Did you turn your mic on?
Yes, are you guys hearing me?
We hear you. How are we doing sound-wise, ladies? All right, we're going.
Fantastic. That was quite the introduction. Thank you very much, Shawn.
You're welcome. And thank you for the podcast interview today.
Well, and I said it in my podcast interview, but I really do have you and your ministry to thank for getting me interested in Mormonism in general. You know, I was kind of wandering, nihilism and agnosticism and not really caring much about religion, and investigating some Christianities and some preachers. And thanks to your show, a friend turned me onto your show, and well, I got the bug, as genealogists would say.
He got the bug, all right. This man got a bug, and I can't believe that's why he's the new approach. Even if he wasn't an atheist, his approach is really consistent with this generation, this younger group of people, my kid's age, and you'd be my child's age. You guys have a very sharp way of doing some things. In fact, before we talk about your sharp way, and remind me, Shawn, what about my sharp way?
All right.
Tell us about your life. Mom, dad, sister, growing up. Just give us the summary of your religious upbringing, things like that.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the light speed version of it. I grew up in the church, obviously, born and raised in Bountiful. And all of my family, extended family, believes in the church, and it was kind of the culture I was raised in. Of course, I had an elder sibling who kind of left the church before I did, but come about 16, 17 years old, I just became apathetic towards it, and said, yeah, I don't really have much reason to continue attending church. It was kind of boring. So
did mom and dad allow that? Did they let you have that freedom?
Yeah, they definitely did. They respected my beliefs a lot, and I really do appreciate that. But they understood that the more, if they were to fight me on these kinds of things, that they would just push me away further. So, I mean, my parents were really, really smart, and I often credit them, and as well as the church, for giving me a solid social structure to grow up under, and teaching me a lot of social skills that I use endlessly. Excellent. Every day of my life. So That's not to say that the church doesn't have some damaging beliefs that come along with the good social structure.
Mm-hmm. So 15, 16, you head out, and then you start to search. How did that come about? You start to search into Mormonism.
Well, I had moved out of my parents' basement, and that was kind of my years where I was just apathetic. I didn't really care much. And then I moved out to Colorado and began talking with a buddy of mine who's Christian named Jesse. And, being brought up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he started debating with me because he'd watched your show. He was the guy who told me about it. And he was asserting that Mormonism is not Christianity. And, of course, I, being born in the church and having raised the minor apologetics that I was familiar with, I said, it's the Church of Jesus Christ. Of course it's Christian. Right. And then he gave me some resources, one of which was your show, and said, you know what, let's talk after you learn some things. And then we'll talk on a similar level. And from then forward, I began going through your backlog of Mormon history episodes. And wow. Just wow. I mean, I couldn't get enough of it. I was eating everything up that I could. Your just complete systematic deconstruction of the history. Your sources were, you definitely include a few sources that I was able to look into further, and I was able to, try and take your claims skeptically and then look into them deeper. And I found out that there's a lot of foundation for the claims you're making. And it's like, there's believable stuff out there now. I don't have to believe in stuff just because somebody told me it, so I can actually go back to these source materials.
Got it. Did you go back to Jesse when you were armed?
Good question, actually. Yeah, and he continued to believe in Christianity. He and I had many late night conversations, just talking about belief and talking about the church, his upbringing in Christianity. And I think we both kind of come to an understanding with each other. He considers himself quite agnostic after many conversations, and I consider myself agnostic atheist. So, yeah, but I mean, that's through no small part of all of our conversations.
I see.
He's an incredibly smart guy.
Mm-hmm. What was it? When was what was the factor where you said, "Hey, I don't know about any of this. In fact, I might not even believe there is a God," and you started on that road? At what point did that happen? Before you started to sojourn into LDS history?
Yeah, that's kind of a hard, I didn't have a definitive time that I was believing and then wasn't believing.
You weren't unborn all of a sudden?
No, you're right, exactly. I didn't have a roadside falling off of it. So as I was going through the church as a teenager, I had come to kind of an agreement with the church that it's not for me. And I don't know where I developed this, but this is probably product of my millennial culture, but I decided religion is for the weak. And I kind of carried that as a bit of a back thought through all of my studying through world religions. But then as I began to study many more religions and reading the Quran and reading through the Bible and reading through anything that I could get my hands on and trying to watch documentaries and watch debates between atheists and theists, and I kind of, I was watching Ancient Aliens too, and really stuff that's doesn't really have a whole lot of backing to it. And finally I came to this one precipice where I said, you know what? It all makes sense. Joseph Smith was a prophet. God is real. All of these things play together. Joseph was obviously enlightened by the Anunnaki that live on the Nibiru planet. That's the 9th planet that orbits, and it has a 6,000-year orbit. And I had all of these thoughts going off, and I'm like, wait, that's crap. But they can all be wrong. And that was it. That was when I said, okay, so atheism, that makes sense. So,
got it. So, tell our audience what you've been doing now, and how the podcast got started, how many there are, and then what you've been doing the past month, which just blows my mind.
So the podcast, I decided after I had this realization that religions, by and large, are possibly good, but mostly bad. I decided that I need to understand Mormon history from the foundation. So where else do you start with other than the birth of Joseph Smith? So I began studying through systematically the birth of Joseph Smith. And at the time, I was listening to quite a few podcasts, primarily atheist podcasts, And some of them would hit on topics of Mormonism, but I would just, no, that's wrong. Or, I would take issue, or like, where's your sources for that? I was very empirical about what they were saying. So finally I said, you know what? Nobody's gone through and just chronologically deconstructed this. So that's what I'm gonna do. I saw this niche where, the way to tell a story is from beginning to end. And you have to start with the beginning at Joseph Smith's birth. Now, historians would argue that he was obviously influenced by so many things that were going on long before his birth. I mean, the burned over district was field white, ready to harvest. So I just decided that's when I needed to start the podcast 2.5 years ago. And I published 5 episodes, and I got a lot of feedback. A lot of people said, this is crap. Some people said, you got a great idea, but you got to change it. And then it was just slow evolution from there. And now for over a year now, I've been doing it as a full-time endeavor. I've been able to garner enough support through donations through a website called patreon.com/nakedmormonism. That's if you want to support the production. And all of the content is free out there. So I'm not trying to put any information really behind a paywall, because all of this information needs to be free. And it's research, and that's what people are funding, is research and investigative journalism, which led me to this past month and what I've been doing. I've been reading about these Mormon historic sites for 4.5 years now, reading through these massive 900-page tomes, historiographies, all about Mormon history. And my parents had gone on the Mormon history pilgrimage a couple of years ago, and that was at the time that I was getting interested in it, and I was jealous. So finally I said, you know what? I'm going to get to a certain point. I'm going to go for it myself. I'm going to see these places for myself. So March 17th, I departed Seattle, and I had the one goal of being in Palmyra on April 6th, because that's, of course, the anniversary of the foundation of the church. And I made that goal. I drove all the way across and now all the way back, and here I am in Utah at the very end of it. So it's been a mind-blowing month, to say the least.
You're speaking at Sunstone, which is, if those of you don't know, just look it up online. Sunstone speaks about Mormonism, kind of all the way from the fringe end to the intellectual end to the skeptic end. But you're speaking at Sunstone, and you have a theory. And, can you reveal that theory?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the theory out there as much as possible, because I want people to come at it with a very open mind, and I want the more people who have heard reference to this, they might come at it with a more open mind than other people who haven't. So I'm currently of the opinion, and I'm working with a researcher. We're building a historical model that describes Joseph Smith's possible use of entheogens, or hallucinogens, in order to incite spiritual visitations, which, as you can understand, is quite conjectural. Because if we boil all of the beliefs of early Mormons down to the sacramental wine and the anointing oil that Joseph was using, there's not room for God in that equation.
You tell our audience briefly, if you can, about the connection between Lumen and Smith.
Yeah, so Lumen Walters was a fascinating guy, and Lumen Walters was written about in the book of Pukiai, which was written by Abner Cole, who was running his newspaper out of the E.B. Grandin printing press. He found the manuscript copy of the Book of Mormon before it was done, and began publishing a satire of it, like the first 3 chapters of First Nephi as a satire. And he just analyzed, or he made an analogy between Joseph Smith and Nephi, and then created a fictional story, but hitting on things that actually happened in Joseph Smith's life. And one of the people that he talks about is named Lumen Walters, and he talks about him being a mesmerist and a magic man from the East, who was actually living very near Joseph Smith at the time. But he had gone on a tour of France and Europe and these various places where they were really heavy into the use of alchemy and occult magic. And I don't think that it's very historically conjectural that he was one of Joseph Smith's mentors. Abner Cole, even in the book of Pukiai, says that Joseph took the mantle when Lumen Walters was chased out of town, essentially.
Wow.
So Lumen had a brief stint with Mormonism. He went out to Kirtland for, I believe it was just less than a year. And then after that, he moved to a little town called Gorham, New York, where he owned a tincture shop, an emporium, where he was making, he was known as a very eccentric root and herb doctor. And we have obituaries in these various files about his life that make us believe that if there's anybody that was teaching Joseph Smith the manipulation of hallucinogens, it's Lumen Walters, because you have to be careful with these chemicals. You can cause people to overdose and have very bad experiences or die. But if you manipulate them correctly, then they see angels. So.
That is fascinating. Look forward to hearing how you follow up on that and what you say at Sunstone. We talked about, in your podcast today, you asked me questions about percentages. Shawn, what percentage do you believe in God? What percentage, different things like that. What percentage are you sure there is no God?
Ooh, 0%.
You have 0%, so you're answering similar to me.
Well, so the way that I classify my beliefs or lack thereof is an agnostic atheist, which some definitions of those terms are redundant, but they kind of cover a broad swath of people that are engaged in theological philosophy. And essentially, agnosticism means that I don't know.
Right.
And atheist means I live my life without a God. And the way that I kind of tried to elucidate this point to you is, there are 7 billion people plus living on the planet right now. Whatever percentage of them believe in God. And each of them have their own version of God. They may align with some people. They may completely disagree with some people. I mean, you're a Christian pastor. I bet that your version of God differs from many, many other pastors. And of course, there's a lot of nuance in the Bible in order to try and suss out those theological arguments. But that means that over all of human history, however many hundreds of thousands of years possibly that hominids have been Homo sapien, billions of humans have existed, and each of them have had their own version of God. So that means there have been billions and billions and billions and billions of gods out there. And I choose not to believe in any of them because I don't find evidence for any of them. So that makes me a 99.999 sigma percent an atheist, or that makes, me a 100% atheist because I live without worshiping a God, whereas you or people watching this might be 99.999 sigma percent atheist.
And Jesus Christ? Thoughts? What's that? Where's that coming from?
I'm not sure about Jesus Christ because I love the historical study of Jesus Christ and Bible historianship. They're fascinating, to say the least. But I also am kind of the opinion that there are some fringe theories out there that claim that Jesus Christ was just a mythical person. He wasn't even a real person. There are no eyewitness accounts written of Jesus. Nobody that ever wrote in the Bible actually ever met him in person. The Gospels are anonymous. There's a lot of conjecture about the legendary evolution of Jesus Christ throughout the various Gospels, meaning, from Mark, the earliest manuscripts, or Q, they differ greatly from the Gospel of John. The Synoptic Gospels, all three of them are greatly different than John. And those kind of point to Jesus being a mythical creation of Saul of Tarsus. But the vast majority of Bible scholars think that Jesus was an historical human being, and it's kind of hard to argue with all of them. So I try to side with the majority of historical consensus and say that he was a human being. He was just a Jewish hippie kind of wandering and, had a little bit of a following behind him and cropping up these various cults around the area.
I see.
So.
And in terms of soteriology or blood atonement and all that stuff, that's just created. No. We talked about scorched earth. How much do you think that plays into your current standing toward agnosticism, atheism?
So yeah, I really like your phrase, the scorched earth policy that the church has, because I think it does get to kind of a certain point where you can believe in a totalitarian system that may have good, but also definitely has a lot of bad. And when you're taught to believe that that is the one truth, the one true church, when you mess with people's vocabulary and confabulate truth with church and truth with what is real, then it's really hard to believe in something else once you abandon that truth, once you find out that you were lied to. We talked about it a little bit. It's a deep human desire to trust somebody, and when that violation or that trust is violated, that's a deep human emotion of antitrust. That's frustrating for a lot of people. But that being said, I do think that the church is kind of shooting themselves in the foot, because hardly anybody that is a member of the Brighamite Church leaves and goes to a different version of LDS. Right. A lot of people, especially of my generation, that leave the church, they just say, well, I found out the church is not true. That means all churches aren't true. And in totality, I think that's a good thing, because churches, religions in general, don't have logically defensible positions. They may have theological constructs that they fall back upon, but logic falls apart when you try and ascertain what is God. When you try and figure out the nature of God. So I think it's a good thing that more people are falling away from religion.
I see. Let me ask you, when it comes to logic, and you rely heavily upon logic, how logical is it to believe that human existence, family, love, language, growth, maturation, sacrifice, invention, nature, cosmos, order, all the everything around us,
and puppy dogs too.
And puppy dogs too. How logical is it to believe that that came from nothing?
That's actually a deep philosophical question, and I'm very ill-equipped to answer something like that, because I am not, out of all of the amazing things that you just mentioned, I am not a biologist, I am not a chemist, I am not a cosmologist nor astrophysicist. I am not a veterinarian. I am not any of those groups that you invoked that require specialists in order to understand where they came from. And I focus on Mormon history a lot more than I focus on the existence of the cosmos.
I see.
However, that isn't to say that it's not a fascinating subject.
Yeah.
Astrophysics are amazing. I'm a huge fan of the LIGO discovery back in early or mid 2016, where they detected the cosmic background radiation. They had these two sensors placed, a number, hundreds of miles apart, and they both independently detected the cosmic microwave background radiation. That's really cool stuff. That's all science, And the issue that I take with a lot of theology is that it hides in places where science can't explain. So when somebody says all of the things that we see, all the birds and the trees and life and love and everything came from nothing, that doesn't necessarily mean that because science can't answer that, then therefore God. We need another more believable and testable claim to explain all of that, instead of just saying, well, we don't understand, therefore God. So I don't find any solace in that answer.
How about God and therefore science? I mean, to me, it doesn't work in reverse as you described it. To me, it's self-evident that God, and the reason I say that is not just my own imagination. I believe in that book we talked about, the Bible, that says we know. It says you know. But it says that you have decided to set aside what you intrinsically know, that God whole in your heart you've refused to fill with him, and instead have decided to fill it with science and logic. And I understand how and why. I do. I've been there. So this isn't an accusation. This is just, from my perspective, believing the words of that book. It tells me that you do know. But actually what you've done is you've barricaded yourself around your own reason and logic and whatever hurts you have, and you say no to God. And so the way I explain it to people is that you're responsible for that decision, and I respect you as a human being, and you're right to make that decision, and you're my brother and friend and will always be, is irrespective of what you're saying or believing about God. But from the Christian perspective, you have said, well, let me just back up for a second, because this is interesting to me, and we'll continue on with our discussion about Mormonism.
But I have so many things to say of everything you just said.
I bet you do. But let me finish this thought. Let me just put it this way. There's a big difference between someone who says there is no God and someone who says there is a God. Do you agree with that?
Difference how? That's a broad term.
Well, because someone who says there is something, a child says there is a lizard in the backyard, Mom, and he's this big, has experienced the lizard. The mom says, no, I don't believe you. She hasn't experienced what the kid has. She just simply says there's not. So applying it to atheism,
But she can always go back out in the backyard and look for herself.
She could.
And find that empirical evidence.
But she might not be able to. He's under the ground. He's hiding. He's in the other yard. So the point is, when someone says, I've experienced this, that subjective experience they have is very different from someone says, that experience could not be. It's not true. There is no God. You would have to be all-knowing to be able to declare there is no God.
Which is why I say I'm an agnostic atheist.
I just wanted to get you to that point.
I don't try and hide that at all. I said that right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm an agnostic atheist, and that's a very simple term. I choose to withhold a belief in a God until I'm shown evidence of it.
I don't blame you for that.
I'm agnostic. I do not know. And I'm an atheist. I don't live my life worshiping any specific God, any God at all.
Right. None.
And the problems I often find with anybody who tries to logically defend God, who isn't falling back on a source text like the Bible, somebody who tries to defend like the cosmological argument or the fine-tuning teleological argument, oftentimes they are ascribing, it's like water, a puddle inside of a pothole in the road, looking around and saying, wow, this pothole is the perfect size for me. You know, and it's a reverse cause and effect. It's putting the carriage before the horse.
Okay.
So the more that people try and define whatever their God is, the more they introduce paradoxes. And paradoxes are logically inconsistent, and I like to fall back to logic. There are logical constants and logical fallacies that we can fall back on that have been argued and bickered over by philosophy for thousands of years.
Sure.
I mean, we talked about Descartes. Granted, that's not thousands of years, but I think, therefore I am. That is the one sole truth that he could get to solve solipsism, right? So the point where people try and define who and what God is, whether or not he has a belly button, you know, that is when logic falls completely apart, and I want no part of it.
Okay. So getting back to that, the logic, when you step out and see the universe, I know you're not a cosmologist, and you see a child learning to walk or whatever it is, when you see that, what resonates to you? And I'm just curious, really for myself, what do you say when you see something unfold that seems to say logically it has a creator? What do you say when you see those things?
That thought never occurs to me.
What does occur to you?
Logically, that there's a creator. It's just, I'm really happy that I'm a human being and I can experience this right now.
So it's an existentialist. I'm here now. I got to see this. I'm happy I got to see it. There's no it's no assignment to any type of creator or worship of the creator. It's just, this is.
Well, that introduces a threesome into everything that you experience. You know, if I'm looking at a beautiful view of the Grand Canyon, I can appreciate that I'm a human being living in this world and that there's something so grand and beautiful in front of me, and that science has ways of explaining how the Grand Canyon formed and came to be. But as soon as I say, thank God for that, that introduces something that is completely indefinable and indefensible, and has no place in the thoughts and feelings that are going through my mind. I just sit there and enjoy the beauty of the Grand Canyon. And it's this level of, it's often referred to as presence. You know, I'm very present in that moment.
It's a very popular word today.
Yeah, right. The more that I enjoy my presence in the place and time that I am, the more happy I am in the long run.
I see.
And I just don't see any need to take that one step further to an illogical level.
Got it. what you would call an illogical level. Yeah. So I saw you step back a little bit away by saying, I'm not an expert in this, I'm not an expert in that. Do you have any idea or thought on first cause? Yeah.
See, I have a problem here because I've been reading so much Mormon history. I haven't had the chance to read a lot of books like that. There are quite a few. Lawrence Krauss and Stephen Hawking have written incredible books. Both on the absolute precipice of astrophysics. Both great thinkers of our time. They've written their understandings of first cause, and I don't even try to think that I can understand it.
Okay.
I'm trying to understand Mormon history first.
Yeah, big enough subject. One other question, and we'll get off this topic. Why is there something rather than nothing?
That is the one sole question that theists often ask atheists. I don't know any more than you, and that goes both ways. You don't know any more than I.
Knowing true, but I do have an answer.
I have an answer for any number of things that happen.
What's your answer for that? Why something rather than nothing?
I mean, I could invoke something. It was created by a big purple rabbit sitting in the corner of the room.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm just wondering.
Well,
is that your answer, though? I just want to know what someone who is an agnostic atheist, what is their answer to why there is something rather than absolute, just nothing? I want, and it's a really good question because.
And I think the question is actually flawed, in my opinion.
In what way?
Because I am happy to answer I don't know to a question that is well formulated, but I don't like to say why. I say how. How is there something rather than nothing? How did the universe come to be? Because it's a really big question.
That was my question to you. How? First cause. How?
How did all of this come to be?
Yeah.
But just saying, I don't know, God did it, that doesn't get us anywhere. If we can say, I don't know, but we have some ideas about what, the Big Bang Theory, it's somewhat tenable. It's seeming to find more and more substantiation, especially with the findings of the cosmic background radiation. That's what's left over from the Big Bang. The oldest universe, or the oldest point that we can find in our universe is 13.7 billion years. That is a long time. That is a very messy and wasteful system to all just create human beings.
Well, you know that I can subscribe to Big Bang no problem so that's, to me, that does not affect whether there is a God or not a God, but we've talked about that. One final question on theology, or being an atheist versus a theist. You have a couple children, 3 and 5. Your car breaks down in East LA. It's 12 midnight. You have walking down the street 3 professed Christians. You have walking down the street 3 professed atheists, maybe even God haters. Where are you more comfortable?
We can look at statistical data and understand that the vast majority of terrorists in this country have been Christian, while it's often painted that the Muslim terrorism is the biggest problem in the world. Christian terrorism and people acting violently as Christians and under the guise of Christianity, saying that I'm doing this in defense of my beliefs, are absolutely terrifying. But I cannot find a single example in popular media anywhere where somebody has killed somebody because they are an atheist, where they say, I am so mad that somebody is doing something. I am so mad that there is no God. I am so mad that those theists don't share my atheism, therefore I'm going to kill them. Now, historically, people like to point back to, Stalin. People throw the Stalin grenade and the conversation's over.
Sure.
But that just shows that human dogma is the problem. So every single time I would answer, I would really hope that they're atheists, because they might be Christian terrorists, and if they find out that I'm an atheist, they might kill me.
Okay, so what I'm saying is they are three absolutely hate God, and they are three absolutely convicted, sincere Christians. Not fundamentalist Christians, not radical blow-up Kansas City Christians. I'm not talking about terrorists. I'm talking about true Christians, true haters of God. You're with your two children. It's midnight. You're in East LA. You're saying you want to befriend the guys who hate God with your children. That's who you'd prefer. Really, are we really being honest?
This
here?
may be a fundamental understanding of what atheist is. I can't hate something that I think doesn't exist.
Right, but okay, they hate believers in God.
I would really hope I'm not a believer in God then. Well, and I understand like what you're getting to.
Will you answer the question? Is my question.
You understand through your lens, through your worldview, you understand that Christians are these loving, amazing.
Real Christians are.
Real Christians are.
They are.
And then that can fall back to the no true Scotsman fallacy because they would call you maybe a bad Christian for something that you believe.
It's doctrinal, but in terms of behavior, a true Christian's loving. So we're talking about three loving people versus people who have no answer to anything at all. They have no higher power answer.
Let me, I'll answer the question. I say I hope they're atheists. Again, please let them be atheists, because something that I realized when I came to be an atheist is that I don't really get a second chance, and it really increased my love for the life that I live. It made me understand that I don't have something beyond this that I can look forward to, and it makes me appreciate life. The finality of life doesn't have as much of an impact because we're all just eternal beings. We're all eternal spirits, and whatever happens here, it has an impact on what's going to happen after we die. But
a terrible one, the way most Christians would say.
Exactly.
Okay.
But we still have something afterwards.
Yeah.
Whereas the vast majority of atheists that I talk to, and I go to atheist conventions frequently, podcasting atheist conventions quite frequently and talk to atheists, the majority of them that come out are much happier, and they enjoy and appreciate their life so much more because they understand, I don't have anything after this. That's not without its problems, though, because a lot of people who believe in God and believe in our spiritual transition, when they have that assurance that when I die, I'm going to get to see my dead family members. I'm going to get to pet my dead cat. I'm going to live in happiness and harmony with the universe for the rest of eternity.
And all my other Christian brothers and sisters.
There you go. It's going to be like a big airport, everybody hugging each other. Oh, good to see you, right? But it introduces a lot more urgency and finality to life and wanting to leave a positive impact on the world when you understand that all I have is this life. I better make the best of it, and I better leave a good legacy behind me.
I don't understand the logic behind I better leave a legacy behind me when there's nothing after it. It makes no sense to me. But you're presenting it.
In atheism, there's actually two deaths. And this is something a lot of atheists don't talk about, but there is actually two deaths. And it's not a physical and then a spiritual death. It's your first physical death that happens when your body gives up, whatever the case may be. And then the second death is what you experience the last time somebody ever speaks your name. Because from then on, you're never referenced, you're never talked about, you're lost to history. But if you leave a positive legacy behind and people can say, man, that Descartes, he had some really interesting thoughts. Yeah, Nietzsche, I may not agree with him, but he was a thinker. That's a legacy worth leaving behind.
It sounds like a religion.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderfully crafted religion where as long as people are speaking your name on the earth, you're alive. And then you actually experience the second death when people stop speaking your name.
My sentience isn't. My free will to choose, and free will is a whole other discussion, but I'm just simplifying it for that reason. My free will to exist and choose and eat a yummy breakfast, that no longer
That's
exists.
at the first death.
But I mean, it's. Do you think that it's important that after you die that people here on earth speak good of your name?
Not at all. Not if there is nothing after this life. Not if there's not a God. I don't give a rat's rear end what anyone says about me when my life is over. Why would I? Who cares? I mean, in fact, I would want them to speak of me with infamy. I would want to be the world record holder for bank robbery. And I mean, I'm just
Shawn,
speaking the truth. that's my carnal nature. I would like to be known for having the
really
most women.
true?
Absolutely.
Because when I became an atheist, I mean, I raped and killed exactly as many people as I always wanted to, which is 0.
But that's
I
different
never
between
wanted
you
to.
and I. You see, for me, and you began by saying Christianity or religion is for the weak. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It is for the weakest of the weak.
Well, Shawn, do you sincerely have desires to kill somebody?
Sure.
Really?
Yeah. Cut me off at the right time of the day when I have
No. Okay, screaming at your enclosed car windows is one thing.
Yeah.
You know, getting in a fist fight is one thing, but legitimately killing somebody in cold blood,
depends.
Do you really want to do that
It
to anybody?
depends on the situation. My flesh is no good thing. So this is why it's so important to me to confront someone who will propose that the better way is to go for weak people without God. Because for the weak people, you won't stand a chance in a world of the weak people. What you are is, like we talked about, you're the Nietzschean Ubermensch. You're the Superman. You've been able to overcome because you've been gifted with the proper intellect, and you can rationalize and reason through situations in life because you're magnanimous. And you are just happy to be here, and you're willing to die and live a good life. But the majority of the weak, they will look at you as dinner.
Well, maybe we can, if we can all come to an understanding of a risk-rewards type of idea, because a lot of what we do is motivated by how this is going to impact me in the near future, right? Not a lot of people are motivated by what I'm going to do right now is going to send me to heaven or hell. A lot of people are saying, if I go to work today, I'm going to be able to put food on the table for the family. Or, you know, if I cut this guy off, he might come out of the car and beat the crap out of me, right? People are often motivated by very short-term consequences. And if we can all understand that utilitarian type of idea, the most good for the most people, if we can all come to that understanding, then the world, by and large, will be a better place. But that is my model for a utopia, just as your model for a utopia is everybody, let's come to Jesus, and all of those bad Christians stop being bad Christians.
No. That's not my idea of a utopia. The utopia will never be here, and it's a future event, so I don't believe in utopia. But what you're saying here about utilitarianism, it is a utopian thought, and it will never exist, ever.
But it's not a binary idea. We can always strive to work closer towards it.
I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that.
If I and 10 of my friends are trying every day to make the world a better place, then by and large, that's one tiny, tiny fraction of a percentage that the total good of the world is moved towards a better good.
Can I be included in those friends?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if
you're working towards a better world, we're brothers in the better.
Okay. So my idea of a better place is might makes right. It's Marxian. And that's not abnormal in this world. Might makes right, my brother. So I'm part of your 10 friends. I don't have anything that's going to guide me as to how to make my moral decision. We're all atheists, or we're agnostic atheists. And I say, well, listen, part of my idea is might makes right. So why can't that be part of the way that we live?
Well, might makes right leaves the world in disrepair.
That's an opinion.
That only works for so long. You can only bludgeon your enemies to death for so long until they are more mighty than you.
But that's an opinion. I mean, it's been tried by many, many world leaders smarter than you and I.
Every empire that's ever risen has fallen. The mightiest empires have risen and fallen. The Roman Empire, the Mongolian Empire, the United States Empire will fall someday.
Hence the ability of man.
Might makes right works in a very short-term perspective. But if you could be convinced that that punching that guy in the head in the long run is going to be a bad idea, if I could logically elucidate that point to you, would you choose to not punch a guy in the head as opposed to punching him in the head?
Absolutely not, because that's not what guides me. What guides me is my emotions and my immediate needs for gratification, not your logic.
Do you think that emotions can be trumped by logic?
I don't think so. Not in many, many people. Our prisons are full of people. Their emotions, their logic has never been able to control their emotions.
A lot of people are in prison because of a very bad legal system, but that's a whole other issue. But I'm an atheist. I'm a professed adversary to a theist. You're not punching me in the head. You're having a logical conversation, and I'm really enjoying this conversation.
But there's only one reason for that in me, is what I'm trying to point out, is because if you and I were 15 years ago sitting somewhere and talking, we would get to the point where I would punch you. And that's why I needed Jesus. Because I realized in my flesh is no good thing. And that's what has to be understood. It can be criticized for being a system for the weak, but that's admitted in Scripture. It is the weak that find him. It's not the powerful who find him. He says that himself. The weak find him because they know I am dangerous when left to my own devices. And it's the reason I confront you. It's not because I'm against your right to be an atheist or to promote it on your podcast, which I'm a part of now. But it's that what you are presenting to me is irresponsible in a world where the majority of people, if given a life without God, and I know this is very, if they're given that choice and you can convince them there isn't one, I don't think you're benefiting the human race. I think you're hurting it. And so that frightens me.
Well, and I think that we might have to agree to disagree on this because we just have a fundamental disagreement about what makes people good people. And I think that's an inherent need to be part of a society that isn't involved in constantly punching each other in the head. And while those urges exist, we may have conversations with somebody where we really want to punch them. But in the long run, it's always going to be better to suppress those emotions and have a logical conversation. Now, in the moment, that's really hard to do a lot of times.
Yeah, it is.
It's easier for some people. It's harder for some people. That being said, but if we can all agree that the less punching that we have of people, the better, then I think we can agree. We can come to a general agreement on that. The mechanism by which we attain more peace, they can vary, and that's okay.
And in our discussion, we have talked about punching people in the head. The problem is that the spanse is huge because we're talking about ripping people off. We're talking about taking advantage of people. We're talking about stealing their wives, hurting their children, lying on our taxes. We're talking about all sorts of things, not just punching in the head, that will be a threat to the undermining of society. Believe me, I know personally the damage organized religion does. I stand with you on the evils of organized religion.
Right.
I hold your hand. As a gay man, I'm not gay, but as a gay man, I hold your hand and say,
brother.
Yeah, but I do strongly differ with you on your view of how atheism trumps true Christianity. That's a tough one for us.
To go back to your example of the three people walking down the street, my car's broken down, it's a dark alley.
2 children with you.
2 children with me, even worse. I would be terrified if those 3 people were fundamentalist Bible-believing Christians. Because they can justify,
really quick, when you say a fundamentalist Bible belief, are you talking about Westboro Baptists?
Well, I mean a Bible literalist. Okay,
what about me?
Literalist. You're a friendly guy. I've never met you on a bad day.
Yeah.
I'd be terrified to meet you in an alley, not knowing you.
Right.
But I mean, you're one of the nicest people I've ever met.
But if I'm living by my spirit, that's the guy I'm talking about, Bryce. If I'm living by that spirit, not the flesh guy, but that guy, you really would rather have people who don't have?
Well, I mean, 3, okay, I mean, I'm using an extreme example. You're using God-hating atheists as an extreme example. Well, let me use Christians as an extreme example, a subsect of Christianity.
Okay.
Literalist, Bible literalist, fundamentalists, old with the New Testament, people who believe in a book that says that these people are living on your land, or they have beautiful daughters, or whatever the case may be. It's okay for you to go kill them. If they're a Canaanite, a Midianite, an Amalekite, whatever, it's okay for you to kill them and take their daughters as your wives and slaves.
Yeah.
I'd be terrified to meet those people on the street.
Bryce, I know some of the most dogmatic Christians you've ever met. They're not Midianite killers, but Matt Slick,
yes,
Jason Wallace, and another person. I can guarantee you, as fundamental Calvinistic, whatever they are, I would welcome them. And I just think that's only fair. That if you see somebody today in America who are 3 Christians, and you take them, even if they're extreme fundamentalist Christians, I wouldn't see them as being any threat to a man with his 2 children on a dark night, but only a help. Because at least within the Christian ethos, it's help people, love them. But you say no.
Well, as long as they're not Catholic and the children aren't boys. I mean, yeah. No. This
okay, touche. All right, okay.
Well, I mean, this does get to...
Okay, you won that one.
All right.
Okay.
We'll leave it there.
All right. We have 1 minute left. We have I know,
kidding.
it goes like that.
It does.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to take calls.
How can a Mormon use the same critical thinking used to see Joseph Smith in the Book and Hour of Man and yet not see the same doubts and lack of evidence of Jesus rising from the dead, a great ark to house all animals during the flood? Basically, aren't they both a matter of faith and not evidence or science? My response to that would be there is evidence, far more evidence for a biblical stance than there is for an LDS stance. We don't have a Zarahemla. We have a Jerusalem. We have a people. We have genetics. We have ancient manuscripts that have been tested. We have thousands of scholars, PhDs, who are into those manuscripts. We have no manuscript for the Book of Mormon. So I think that is not a good comparison. That question of saying, if you are criticizing Mormonism, you should be criticizing Christianity, because they are very different in my estimation. Go ahead.
This gets kind of down to the fundamentals of epistemology, how we know what we know, right? In my understanding of Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, it's a very recent religion, and it was founded in a time where we have copious core documents and a lot of things to verify. The Bible simply doesn't have that luxury, so we're dealing with apples and oranges when it comes to the historiography or the historicity of anything in the 2 stories.
Okay. What is your answer to the moral argument? Is there, you're going to hear, you've heard this a lot, objective right or wrong? If not, then it's all society based and Hitler didn't do anything wrong because it's all opinion.
Objective right or wrong, the way that I see it is we have social constructs in order to live in a social based species, and this pale blue dot orbiting around the sun doesn't care if we kill each other off. Simply doesn't care. But that doesn't mean that I'm not part of that communal species and that I don't want us to be more moral towards each other. It means that we all have to agree on some level of morals, and luckily we're living in a time where the world is more peaceful by and large than it has ever been with any other overarching massive superpower of empire. So, I think the world is pretty great as it is right now, and there are certain anomalies like Hitler and Stalin and these other various people we can point to that are absolute horrid human beings, but their beliefs had no impact on who they were.
We're going to do a 2-minute wrap-up. I will give a wrap-up comment, and then I'm going to let you wrap it up with the final say.
Oh, thank you.
And my wrap-up is, earlier we were talking, and I don't have proofs. I know the proof arguments I can make, but all I can say is that Jesus, and I told Bryce this earlier, there's a story in the scripture where there was a man who was born blind and Jesus healed him, and the Pharisees came and they said, hey, listen, was he this? Did you believe he's that? Was he a prophet? And finally the guy just gets fed up and he says, look, I don't know if he's a prophet. I don't know where he is, but I was born blind and now I see. And so my petition to you is to continue but seek and give him directly a chance. That's all my petition is. And see if he acts in your life in a way where you will realize that you were once blind and you now see. It is a subjective experience we all individually have, and we can get misled and we can get lost and we can become fanatical and everything else. But I just witnessed to you that Jesus, God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten son. And he changes a wretch like me into someone who does love you and does welcome you into his life and on the show. And you're always welcome. And I want you to know that that love is shared among people who are true Christians. And I hope you'll meet some rather than the people who just destroy your faith and desire to be a Christian altogether. Wrap it up, my brother.
Yeah, I think I'll reflect that and just say, you know, I have a lot of really good feelings and a lot of coincidences and a lot of amazing things that happen in my life. And I could meet somebody who's a spaghetti head and say, praise the flying spaghetti monster for those, you know, those amazing miracles that have been worked in your life. The point is we can apply a number of these logical words, these logical constructs on human subjective feelings, but language evolved long after human emotions ever did, and anything that we try and ascribe to our emotions are oftentimes insufficient. So when we try and ascribe our good feelings or our good experiences to some kind of unseen, unprovable being, I think we kind of lose in translation what those feelings really mean to us. And it's important to accept what those feelings are and appreciate them for what they are and appreciate our shared humanity. I mean, we can say that we're all, you know, brothers in Christ, but I like just saying that we're all humans and we all have to deal with reality that we share. And that is probably the most noble goal to reach, is try to come to some understanding about this crazy little blue pale dot that we're flying around the sun.
Thank you. I've learned some things, and
Likewise.
and a
Thank
great
you, Shawn.
joke, as long as they're not Catholic. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't beat that one. Sorry, Catholics out there. I'm just kind of joking. You get it.
But it's true.
Yeah. Hey, Bryce, Blankenagel,
Yes.
Blankenagel, and we'll see you next week here on Heart of the Matter.
Thank you.
I'm on a ride, going nowhere. I am an existential cowboy on the wind, and I won't be coming out, I'm going in. This man's awake, a storm's arising, the dawn's awaiting till 100 monkeys know, and I can feel